It's not as bitter. Uh-oh.
Here we go.
Wake up, Mark.
Wide awake.
Here we go. It's August. It's last chance at vacation, summer vacations. I see that some of the folks are gone. Anyway, I called a meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board to order, and it is August 20, 2025, 12:35 p.m. And you can see we've got this acknowledgement regarding the Dakota land, Dakota water, and the people of the Dakota tribes. And we're going to have a little bit more in-depth conversation about that in October at both exec and probably here at the tab as well, and maybe have a presentation. And then we'll think about how we want to go about recognizing the people whose land we occupy here today as we move forward into the future with this acknowledgement. And we can maybe follow the guidance of the Met Council itself, but the tab may want to do something different than that. And we'll get that guidance from Deb Barber as to what they've been doing there. So having called the meeting to order, I'm going to ask if there's a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Gattel moves. And,
John.
okay. Second, motion is second on the approval of the agenda is published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We have an agenda. Anyone from the public that wishes to address the Transportation Advisory Board on a matter of concern to them? Okay, seeing no one coming forward and hearing nothing, let's move on to the reports of the various committees. The chair report is brief. We had a tab exec committee meeting. We discussed today's agenda items plus agenda for next month. We tried to wedge that work in between this meeting and the prior meeting, which dealt with the policy maker work we've been doing around the next regional solicitation. And we'll be reporting on that later in the meeting. So that's it for me. I'll turn now to fresh off the road, Connie Sahibjam, to talk about, he was just at a district meeting up in Detroit Lakes.
Yes, Mr. Chair,
Just
thank
got in here
you.
about an hour ago.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members, glad to be here again. Yes, I was up in Detroit Lakes where we had we have our operations meeting, statewide operations. Each month we meet in a different location. This month was District 4's turn. So anyway, 3.5 hour drive, but it's a pleasant drive. Weather is good, so little different feel than Metro, of course, when you go up there. A lot of trees and water. Beautiful state we have here in Minnesota. Few things as usual. I wanted to remind folks of our importance of safety and safety on our roads, and maybe share some numbers with you. And I'll first talk about Metro region itself. We had, as of end of July, we had 83 fatalities total, and that's about 40% of the state level fatalities that we've had. Of those 83 in Metro, 14 were pedestrian, and 12 were motorcycles, and a couple of bicycles. The motorcycle one is 34% of statewide accidents that has happened and fatalities that we've had. As we know, speeds have increased on our highways quite a bit. I think it's remaining from the COVID days when speeds went up. There was nobody on the road, so people got used to traveling fast and being in a hurry. And the same thing applies to motorcyclists too. And now, last time we talked about the new law where motorcycles can go in between vehicles and when traffic is slower and things like that. And we were going to look at that and see if that's had any impact on the motorcycle riding situation. Going up statewide, as of today, I got the number. It was 219 fatalities we've had, and Monday it was 219, and today is 219, which is, I always look at it daily, and so we haven't had any the last couple of days, so that's always good to see. But the 219 is statewide is lower, much lower, just like last month. Last year, this time, we were at 274. And so it's been a lot lower. And of those 219 fatalities statewide, 23 are pedestrian, 37 motorcycles, and 8 bicycles, and 5 ATVs. And the trend we have looks like we're going to be a lot less than last year. Last year, it was 477 fatalities, and this year looks like we're projection to be about 380, and 400 has been a nominal number, seems like, for a long time, plus or minus, and we'll hopefully be below that. Another reminder, probably the last reminder for the Minnesota Highway Freight Program. There's around $51 million for the years 2029 and 2030. That's that agencies can apply for, and the solicitation ends September 3rd. So we just have a few days left, and this is mainly for projects that are in the STIP that are exempt from the greenhouse gas and VMT, those expansion projects that triggers the greenhouse gas VMT reduction rules cannot apply for this for obvious reasons. Then I wanted to just give a quick update, and again, apologies for all the construction work, but we're coming close to this fall season, which means we're going to wind down at some point. The big one was our I-94 project. As you noticed, last weekend was the last closure, full closure, and our promise was to get the lanes all open for the state fair, which starts this week, I think. And so that's flowing much better, and in line with that, our 394 and 55 project that happen to be parallel to each other, those are still ongoing, but those will be done in the fall. And there's other big projects down in 494, but those seem to be, sometime when you're building stuff, you minimize access and traffic actually flows a lot better through there, so it's not as bad as normal. Because of a lot of the attention that we've gotten this year from the construction, it felt like there was a lot of it all over. And we at MnDOT are reevaluating how we've always communicated with businesses and local agencies and see what the impacts are on other parts of the system. And our businesses, as you remember, during legislature, a lot of businesses were hoping to get some level of reimbursement and things like that because of the construction. So we're kind of changing how we will for the next year to communicate more deliberately and looking at it as a two-way conversation, making sure we realize it's a lot more important what's received than what's given as far as communication goes, making sure everybody really understands what the impacts are and work with them. And I had a pleasure earlier in the week to visit with one of the business, happened to be a construction company, Mortensen, and we impacted their business doing work on 55. And it went really well. And talking with them, you know, they're a big company that does a lot of work around the state. They built the U.S. Bank building, and they were showing me all the sequencing that they do whenever they build things. And I think pictures will do a lot of wonders. You know, we sometimes we put things on our website that everybody sees it. We have words written down, but it may not get registered, as well as color pictures, and even conceptual. So we're going to do better next year. So that's my promise as a Metro District Engineer for everyone. I've been visiting our truck stations, our maintenance folks regularly, and we're getting ready for the winter. They're getting ready for snow and ice season a little early, but I think they are working on that. Workforce is always a challenging thing for us to be able to fully staffed, but as always, we will give it 110%, make sure the roads are safe and cleared. Last item, Mr. Chair, is as you probably know, the federal bill, the IIJA, is around the corner, the end of it. It was a 5-year bill, and it is going to end September of 26. So hopefully, federal government and Congress are working on the next one, and probably starting now to hopefully be in place by next September 30th. So it will be in effect October 1st of 26. And if not, then we'll have continuing resolution with the previous numbers. So I'm sure every state is working on, so are we, what is important for us, Minnesota, to get the message on to decision makers and to the Congress, and there's different ways to do that, directly or through AASHTO. AASHTO is the body of all the state DOTs that meet regularly. Our annual meeting is going to be in November, and I'm sure AASHTO will have a big platform that represents all the DOTs, which is a little more difficult because you have different colors of politics within different states, and so trying to encompassing everyone's wishes is more difficult. But it's a game that's always played, and every so often. So with that, I think, Mr. Chair, I stand for questions and yield my rest of my time to others.
I received them. Any questions for Connie? Thoughts? Okay. Yeah, we'll be mindful of that reauthorization work.
Right.
That goes on. It'll be important to all of us. So, we don't have Frank Kolash with us today, but we got Amanda Jarrett-Smith, very able substitute, and pleased to have you with us. We see you once in a while.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
When duty calls, so thank you. Do you have anything to report on behalf of the MPCA?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few updates. I think the committee is familiar with our Volkswagen settlement program, where we're issuing various grants over the past several years. We have an open grant for freight switcher locomotive replacements. That's open till October 22nd. Also wanted to let the committee know that we will have an open RFP for electric vehicle fast chargers coming open here in the coming soon, no specific timeline. Also just wanted to highlight that we've been experiencing quite a bit of issues with air quality over the past few months with the wildfires up in Canada. You may have been seeing air quality alerts quite a bit. We're on track for an unfortunate record this year, where we're likely to see more air quality alerts this year than we have in any previous year. So that continues to be quite a bit of an effort for our agency in collaboration with other agencies, and we appreciate our collaboration with the DOT, for instance, in getting that word out for folks so that they can take action to protect their health. Also wanted to note that the federal EPA has they've been doing quite a bit of activity related to deregulation in the air quality and climate change realm. But right now there is an open comment period related to rolling back vehicle emission standards for greenhouse gases. This is something that our agency is very concerned about, in collaboration also with other sister agencies in the state government, and are planning to make some comments into that docket, but wanted to make that more broadly, make you all aware of that as well. And then on maybe a bit of a happier note, the State Fair is coming up, and just wanted to encourage people to stop by the Eco Experience. We host that building every year. It's a really great opportunity to learn about all sorts of things related to the environment, actions that people can take in their own lives to protect the environment. And it's also a great partnership that we have with folks from the region and around the state. So really, if you're stopping by the State Fair, I encourage you to join us at the Eco Experience. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Questions? All right. Quick question from the chair here. The RFP on the fast chargers, who would that be going out to? Who would be eligible there?
Good question. We can't really talk about eligibility until it's open, so I don't have the details there. But
Would it be units of government that can apply, or would it be private sector people, or?
great question. I don't have the answer to that, but I could get back to you if that
And
would help.
what's the timing on that? Do you know?
Soon.
June.
Soon.
Soon. Is that June? June 26th. Oh, okay. Never mind. All right, we don't have Carl Crimmins with us today. I don't see Bridget Reeve. No Carl, no. So no report from the MAC, and I'll turn now to Deb Barber for a Met Council report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one thing to discuss today. We have a little update on Metro Micro, a presentation later today during information on mobility improvements. But as you know, we started Metro Micro with a pilot in North Minneapolis and recently expanded it to Roseville and Woodbury. And just for kind of update, because those were our first real suburban markets. We have increased from 200 rides a week in January to over 1,500 a week in August, so it's moving pretty quickly. I think it's really important for everyone to hear some of the places where people are going. So for retail, it's Walmart, Target, Cub Foods, transit hubs. They're going to Rosedale Transit Center, Gold Light stations, C&D line stations, and for sort of their community-based activities, it's the YMCA, libraries, and senior housing. So when we talk about transit connecting people where we really want it to go, this is really facilitating with all of that, as well as doing the last mile to connect to the broader transit system. On a side note, we just launched the service in Bloomington last Saturday, so we're really excited. And coming soon in September, on the quick on its heels, is Metro in Blaine. So looking forward to seeing how all that goes. Just a little update.
Good. Questions for Member Barber? Anything related to her report? All right, very good. Thanks, Member Barber. And turn now to Gary Hansen.
You had more?
Our colleague Gary Hansen. Oh, was there a question over
Just
there?
a quick question. I was wondering when the Bloomington service for Metro Micro will begin?
It started last Saturday.
Oh, it did. Great,
Yep.
thank you.
Very good. Other questions? Okay, let's go on to Gary Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Suburban transit providers report express and fixed route ridership increases of up to 26% and microtransit increases of up to 40% year over year. Southwest Transit's airport route ridership has doubled since launching in April, and Minnesota Valley Transit Authority's Connect service is averaging nearly 600 rides daily. The Maple Grove Transit and Plymouth Metrolink Joint Transit Needs Assessment Study is expected to result in implementation of service changes around year-end, including additional express and microtransit service. And as Deb mentioned, we will be hearing more on microtransit in an informational report later on today's agenda. Finally, MBTA and Southwest Transit are providing service to all 12 days of the Minnesota State Fair, and they're offering weekend service to the Renaissance Festival. That's my report.
All right, very good. Questions for Member Hansen? All right, thanks, Member Hansen. Joe McPherson, our TAC chair. I don't know if you have anything to report out on for TAC before we go to the work of the day, but check in with you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, nothing to report as far as TAC, just hopefully Minnesota Vikings starting their season here. Hopefully there's something we can do to help them out this year. We need a Super Bowl win one of these years. But that's all I have.
All right. Yeah, stand by. We're going to come back to you in just a moment. We've only got one item on the consent portion of the agenda. That's the minutes. I don't know if people have looked over the minutes. If somebody wants to move approval or make any changes or corrections.
Move approval.
Member Hansen moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Karwoski.
Second, Karwoski. And any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of July 16, 2025 for the tab, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are adopted for July 16, 2025. Now we'll go on to the non-consent portion of the agenda and bring Joe McPherson, our TAC chair, back up and walk us through the various non-consent business items that we need to deal with today, starting with 2025-20.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of TAB. This first item here is actually an old item coming back again. This was included on the agenda in June but was removed. It relates to the Met Council support for the City of Anoka's application for funding through the Corridors of Commerce Readiness Program. That is a program that helps agencies get projects ready for an implementation style solicitation or an infrastructure style solicitation. The reason for Met Council supporting this project relates back to Anoka County already have submitting 2 applications to the Corridors of Commerce Readiness Program. And also looking back on this, just a little bit more information relating to this program. Prior to the 2025 legislative session, when you look back at the past couple of years, legislature has required that when looking at the Corridors of Commerce program, you need to look back not only at this program, but the past 2 consecutive programs. And you've got to allocate funds to the metro area, which is essentially that 694, 494 ring, so that urban core. And then you have the next stretch, which is kind of the donut around the metro area. There's an allocation of funds that needs to be allocated to that region. Then you have outstate. And so prior to the changes through the 2025 legislative session, that allocation actually would have resulted in that Metro Core not receiving any funds in this solicitation. So with that in mind, the solicitation was opened up. No projects were submitted in that urban core or that Metro Core. After the change from the legislative session, that changed direction. They removed that look back for the last 2 consecutive solicitations. So with that, that opened the door for Metro projects to be submitted. So MnDOT opened it up, and there was only 1 project submitted. That was through Maple Grove, the Fish Lake interchange on 94 and 494 on the northwest corner of the cities. So with that being said, that was the only project submitted. So after that, it's coming back to TAB for consideration. Again, the reason that Anoka County is not supporting this is because we already submitted 2 important projects in our region, which is the 65 Highway 10 interchange in Blaine, and then also 85th Street or 85th Avenue and University Avenue in the city of, it's right on the corner of Spring Lake Park, Blaine, and Coon Rapids. So with that, that's the background on this one. Again, the action is for Met Council to support their application.
All right, very good. Questions for Chair McPherson on this matter? Is there a motion to adopt action transmittal 2025-20 in the form of its recommended motion?
So moved. Jepson.
We got a motion and a second on the adoption of, was it Petrick?
No, John.
Oh, okay. Motion and second on 2025-20 in the form of the recommended motion, which is that the Transportation Advisory Board recommend to the Metropolitan Council the City of Anoka's Highway 47 BNSF Railway Crossing Project to MnDOT for scoring consideration in the Corridors of Commerce Readiness Advancement Solicitation. Any further discussion on that matter?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you. I just have a question. I'm just curious. Let's say another county.
Would you turn off your backup beeper?
Oh, there's a concert going on.
I know.
It's loud enough just to be distracting, but not good.
Yeah, I didn't mean to distract you either. I just pass it up.
I was curious on this. So I know this maybe happened by accident. Good. I'm glad you provided the background. But let's say if we're limited to 2 submittals per county, and if the Met Council is going to submit this one, which is the 3rd one for that county, what prevents any one of the 7 counties from submitting more than 2 and then just having the Met Council support the submittal of the extra projects? Just curious. Am I missing something?
Sure. Yeah. So Mr.
Sure.
Chair, member, great question. So in that case, the Met Council is allowed to support up to 2 projects, treated just like a county would. They can submit or support 2 projects. So if you had 2 counties that submitted 3, the Met Council would have the choice of supporting those 2 additional projects.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, we got a motion and a second. We got discussion completed. All those in favor of adoption of action transmittal 2025-20 in its recommended form, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Action transmittal 2025-20 in its recommended form is adopted. Next matter is 2025-18.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the recommended motion on this one is that the Transportation Advisory Board approve a scope change request to replace the technology and ADA improvements at 53 bus stop shelters and 4 Minnesota Valley Transit Authority transit hubs with enhanced improvements at 8 transit facilities in MBTA's technology and ADA enhancement project with no reduction in federal funds. So I want to give a little more background on this project and how it came to this point. So in 2022, MVTA submitted an application for that described project. It would be some digital display boards or signs at 53 bus shelters and then also 4 transit hubs along with some other technology improvements to help support ridership and riders to make it a more beneficial experience when they're using the system. They received that funding. They got $500,000 to support the project. After they received the funding, they ran into a number of snags in the project. One was with the e-readers that were proposed at the 53 bus shelters. They realized through a pilot project that was underway in Minnesota that the technology itself struggled in the Minnesota winters in our environment. So that was something they discovered after they put their application in. And then also, several of the bus shelters did not have the electrical services necessary to support that infrastructure. So there are some additional costs and complications with that, as you can expect. So with that, and also being cognizant of the fact they want to put the money where the ridership is, they proposed to change direction on that, change the scope of the project. So instead of the 53 bus shelters and the 4 transit hubs, which is 57 locations, they wanted to put more emphasis on a smaller number of facilities, which is 8. So some of their transit facilities. And with that, it's included in your description. I don't want to go too long here. We only have so much time. But with that, they want to look at some of that enhanced technology. So it would be those e-reader screens or something similar to that, along with ADA improvements and a number of other enhancements at those 8 locations. I believe 3 of those that are included in the proposed scope change were also included in the original submittal of the 4 transit hubs. It was either 2 or 3. So with that, that's their proposal. A few of the other background pieces of information that is beneficial to the group is with the change scope, they're not going to put in the e-readers at the bus shelters, but they're going to look at other enhancements there, and they're going to dedicate other funding sources to complete that work at the 53 bus shelters. Additionally, at the other transit hubs where they're not going to plan on using the proposed federal funds, they're going to complete those enhancements through other means or methods. I think there was one transit hub where after COVID, they actually ceased service at that area, so I think that was a change as well to the application. So with that, this originally came through funding and programming and the Transportation Advisory Committee back in June for our consideration. Funding and programming had a discussion, passed it, they passed it, approved it, recommended it for consideration at TAC. TAC took a look at it, and based on the information that we had in our hands at that time, we asked them to supply more information for our knowledge and our consideration to review this submittal. Because as always, we want to take a look at this and make sure that it's in line with the scope change policy that we have. So we sent it back in June. It did not come to TAB at that time. It went back to the applicant, Met Council staff. They asked for more information, which is included in the packet that you have before you, with additional details on what the changes are, with the original application included, and some of the nuances with that, including what funding they had allocated to each one of those features. So then it's come back now through the full process again. Funding and Programming Committee reviewed it, they approved it, and then the Technical Advisory Committee also reviewed it here in early August, and we approved it. Now, for full disclosure, there were a number of comments and questions and discussion along the way with this project, because as you can see, the original application included 53 locations. Now we're talking about 8 locations. So that's a pretty significant scope change. There is rationale within this document as to why that is and why they're changing that. But we want to be cognizant of the fact that we don't want to set a precedent here that could impact road projects, bike ped projects, and the like. So ultimately, after the discussion and looking at this and realizing some of the background and supporting information on why there's a scope change, ultimately Funding and Programming and TAC both approved the proposed scope change for your consideration today. But it's a lot packed into an 8-page document. I just wanted to open it up here in case there's additional conversation, questions, and I do believe we have a representative from MVTA here with us today in case there's any specific questions on the project.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks for that good backgrounding information. As I recall from our preparatory meeting, one of the other factors that was important to both Funding and Programming and TAC was that everything in that category was funded, and this would have been funded in its modified form had it come in that modified form originally. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that is correct. All of the applications in that category, which was transit modernization, was funded or were funded. Correct.
And then the other thing was that it seems to me like one potential option here is, which would be an alternative to the recommended motion. As I understood from our conversation, there would be $120,000 left over if they did this work in the modified form and it was approved by the tab. So one option would be to either leave those extra funds with them with no reduction in federal funds, or the option would be to approve the scope change and then reduce the federal funds, have that 120,000 come back to the region. Is that an option, indeed an option?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so not quite as easy as that, but yes. So what they had asked to do was, you're right, there's about 120,000 plus or minus, depending on how you look at that could be potentially withheld or removed from the application, depending on how we look at this. And so it could be a modified proposed action on this where we approve the scope change and we reduce their funding amount by the 120,000. That number was discussed at TAC and I believe at Funding and Programming as well to recognize the scope change on this. So that was
the recommendation out of both those advisory boards was that there be no reduction in federal funds.
correct.
Okay. All right. That sets, I think, the stage. And then I think one other thing I had in my notes was that some folks were thinking on the technical advisory side that transit is its own animal, so to speak, and that this is a significant scope change, but based on that fact that there may be some basis there to warrant the change too, because as you said, they're pursuing changes where the greatest amount of traffic is occurring, the highest ridership.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, to add to that, so what we tried to do when we were having these discussions is compare it to like a bike ped project. So if we were looking at an application where, I think I used the example earlier, where the proposal was we're gonna build 13 miles of sidewalk along a corridor, and then the scope change was, well, there's changes to the project, we're only gonna put 2 miles of trail in because that's all we need, and we wanna keep all the funding. That's somewhat of a comparison to this one. How would that be handled, and what would be the background on that? What would we do? And we've had some lengthy conversations on similar projects where they originally proposed a sidewalk or a trail along the corridor under construction. The scope change came in and they wanted to realign that road to a different parallel road. So I forget what city that was in, but that was something we just talked about probably 9 months ago. Maybe Elaine remembers what project that was. Put you on the spot.
You can see her thinking.
Yeah, she's thinking about
it. I know Brian.
Was that St. Louis
commented-
Park?
Huh?
Was that St. Louis Park?
Yeah, St. Louis Park.
Yeah,
It was when we split it onto two different
Yep.
ones.
Yep.
And ultimately, that one was approved
Right.
at that time, but it was a totally new corridor. So it was a pretty significant change there as well. That one, I'd say through the different committees, there was probably 2 to 3 hours of conversation on that as well.
Let me first, for background, and go to Member Hanson. I want to see if you want to provide any information to supplementally on this issue.
No, and I want to thank the TAC chair for that thorough explanation. I think that this change allows MBTA to adjust its implementation approach while continuing to meet the original goal to enhance accessibility and modernize technology. It's not a new project, it's a reprioritization. I think these changes, they're due to significant electrical infrastructure costs and operational limitations for outdoor technology. And it, as was mentioned, it targets higher priority facilities, focusing on technology and ADA enhancement at 8 facilities. And I think this reprioritization is supported by MBTA's Connect microtransit service, which is, as you know, experiencing substantial ridership growth. So I think it's a worthy proposal that warrants approval, and I would like to make the motion, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we can do that. Have you make a motion. We'll look for a second, then we'll go to more in-depth discussion.
I'll move approval of Action Transmittal 2025-18 MBTA's Technology and ADA Enhancements Project.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Second from the commissioner. Now we'll go to discussion. Member Lindeke.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious if you go to the second to last page from MBTA or whoever of this document, they talk about I can easily understand the infrastructure, electricity, and the e-paper not working in winter. That makes sense to me.
Could you pull your microphone down?
Oh, yeah. I'm sort of curious about the reduced service patterns at some originally included locations due to post-pandemic route changes. So I just wondering if you'd be more specific, like MVTA is really, I'm sort of a dork about post-COVID ridership changes. I like to look it up a lot. And you can't really find ridership data at MVTA on the website anywhere. So I have actually emailed them and they've sent me some bespoke documents. But I just, which routes are we talking about? Can I just like more detail about where those changes are, how many routes might be cut or are cut or disappearing or might come back? It's very vague to me at this point.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll call in reinforcements on this one. I know a little more detail about the project.
Sure. Thank you.
So if we have a rep from MVTA.
Yeah, please bring him forward, whoever wants to come forward from MVTA.
Matt's going to take that one. Just introduce yourself.
Chair. Chair Hubman, Member Licky, Matt Fighton with MBTA. I'm our Chief Development Officer. As it relates to the specific route information, I unfortunately do not have that on me today, so I apologize for not having that readily available. But it would primarily be impacting routes that impact our heart of the city, park and ride, not park and ride, but service area right by our Burnsville transit station. Overall, though, I would say it's again really looking at those services. Big picture are related to we've had a shift to microtransit. We've had some growth. We still are seeing growth on our local services, but we had to reinvest those dollars to make sure that we were investing in microtransit. So we actually pulled from our local services, which would decrease some of the services overall to some of these locations. Again, I apologize, I don't have the actual stop locations here for reference, but that's ultimately the main reason for this shift is just reallocating funds from microtransit or from local services to microtransit, which then decreases the usage on some of these sites that we were looking at, which really drove the overall thinking around targeting these areas. So apologies, I don't have the actual route information for you. I do understand that as well.
Yeah, in general, I'm just, as a ballpark for suburban transit, not just STA, but everyone, I'm curious about the future of fixed route suburban service in a post-COVID society. Like, how are we going to do that? Is it important as a goal? And I down the road, I'd like to hear from MBTA about that. What's the future of those services that seem to be struggling right now, but I think are important if you look at other cities and countries where you should be able to build ridership on fixed route service, but it seems like we're not headed that direction. So that's just my feedback.
Completely accept that, and Chair, if you don't mind me responding to that. Okay. Response to that little question? Just really, I'd say we are still experiencing growth on our local services. But to your point, there's been a fundamental shift, I would say, since the pandemic. But actually, since the pandemic, I would say our data is showing that there's a greater need for those local trips. Microtransit is one solution, local service is another solution. To be fair, when I arrived at MBTA 3 years ago coming from Southwest Transit, and we did do a significant reduction in local services to make them ultimately more efficient because we could realize greater efficiency on microtransit services. So we have had some reduction in ridership on our local services as a result of, I think it was a 15% cut overall on our local services, just to make sure that they're ultimately more efficient. I mean, we have to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars as well, but we also have to balance that with the coverage needs of our communities, the accessibility needs of our communities. So that's really the balance we're trying to make, is making sure that we have the fixed route lifeline services that make sure that people have that scheduled trip, that reliability, but understanding that there needs to be some efficiency there too. So we have realized some ridership decreases there, but it wasn't nearly to the amount that we cut. They actually resulted in net increases in ridership with microtransit. So that's kind of the balance we are trying to strike, is we understand that fixed route local services aren't going to have the productivity of, say, an urban core local service. But there still is a need to have that accessibility and connectivity throughout communities, and also making sure that they are, obviously efficient using taxpayer dollars. And that's a judgment call, and that's a mix that we try to balance, like I said. But that's the overall state, kind of where we're at and what we're trying to balance.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Jepson, did you have a question?
Yeah, more of a statement, Mr. Chair, if I could. Thank you for that information. Great background and things, and I really appreciate the TAC and others going back and gathering more information. I trust that you all did your due diligence and got behind supporting this now. I would like to comment, it seems that when we get scope changes or project scope changes brought to us, the rationale behind it is a little bit more unintended consequences. The project, was planned appropriately, but something came up. The two reasons of the three: significant electrical infrastructure costs and operation limitations to outdoor technology. I just feel like those are two very specific things that should have been known when the project was originally applied for. Yes, Minnesota winters are very cold. We all know that. And I just feel, and like if the electrical infrastructure wasn't there, that was a known piece of information at the time of the project application. But like I said, I respect the TAC and those who came before us to get this asking for approval. Those two things just really do concern me for these kinds of requests. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thanks for that. Other thoughts? Yes, Member Martinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think this is actually building a little bit on Member Lindicke's comment, and this is more of a general observation about what I'm seeing and what I'm worrying about. So in this case, we have a shift of resources happening from fixed line transit to microtransit, essentially. I mean, not necessarily exclusively, but that's part of what's happening here. And as we see microtransit taking off and gaining usership, not just in the MBTA system, but now in also our Metro Transit system, one of the things that needs to be noted about it is it certainly is serving a need. It's certainly filling a niche in the transportation system. But the way I think about it, it's like a bad butcher shop. It has no scale. It doesn't scale. So every rider costs the same as the last rider did, whereas fixed routes, every rider costs less than the rider before them did. So I don't know how do you budget for a potentially endless amount of demand on the high end of that. And I certainly would hate to see a cannibalization of the fixed route systems in order to feed that beast that seems to have an endless appetite, potentially. So I guess I raise that as a concern that I think we need to be thinking about as we see microtransit's not going to go away, I don't think. I think it's part of the landscape now, it's here to stay. But I think we need to be aware of that dynamic of its pricing, that it's different. It's deficient in that regard, so.
Thank you. Commissioner Ulrich,
Just
and then Member Barber.
commentary follow-up on that. I think the future of microtransit is going to be autonomous and AI plotted routes. So in other words, you'll have an autonomous vehicle, van type deal with AI plotting the best, several riders will call in a region and or an area tighter, and the course will be plotted by AI. And so it will be, it's not just one rider at a time, it's a plotted efficient course that, I think that's just around the corner, really.
Thank you for that. Member Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important as we talk about microtransit, and you'll hear some of that in Matt's presentation later. And this, like where we're doing it with Metro Transit, is we picked our zones and areas to connect to high frequency transit networks. There's some of that that's still getting built and figured out in some of the other outer suburbs. And so like there is a different need because there's kind of gaps between where there's transit link versus not versus like, and it's to me, even though that yes, it can lead to maybe sort of sometimes convoluted routes it is getting people onto a transit system who otherwise wouldn't. And so even if it's the point that it gets them there and then the next thing you know, they're taking, MVTA to the fair or something like that, it's sort of those steps as we're growing the system. So it is an important piece of the puzzle, but it might be different. You have to look at it somewhat differently in different areas of the region.
Thank you for that. Yes, go ahead, member.
I would also just say, kind of as a comment as far as like cutting local service. There are also some MVTA routes that very heavily duplicate Metro Transit services like the Orange Line and the Red Line. And kind of disappointed to see that we are moving away from local services that don't really have any alternatives when there could be more collaboration as far as feeding into things like the Orange Line and Red Line. Another comment too would be, or a question would be, I think you mentioned that there was going to be additional investments into those 53 stations, or they're going to look at additional things. What are some of those investments that those would be?
So I'll probably ask my colleague Heidi Scholl here to cover the second part of that question, but I can answer certainly the first part of that question. I can tell you that we are in discussions. I agree with you that there are some better coordination that occur with Metro Transit, at least for Red Line and Orange Line, potential duplications there. So we actually are currently in discussions with Metro Transit around those, how we can better coordinate our services in that regard. So I'm happy to report. I think it's a very knowledgeable comment, and we're certainly working on that side. So second part of the question, I will have a Heidi Scholl.
All right, thanks, Member Marino. We're going to get this second part here.
Thank you, Chair.
Scholl, welcome.
Heidi Scholl with MBTA. Great question. So some of those outside sources would be those 5307 funds that we get through FTA. The other part of this would be operating dollars, if it makes sense. And then some of them have actually been funded through various other sources. And so I think a good example would be if we were applying for the technology and ADA grant, but at the same time applying for a similar grant, not necessarily double dipping, but we are applying for both. And then this grant, both of them had technology in it. And so we're awarded this one, and that one might have moved forward quicker than the technology and ADA one. And so with the e-papers not working out, we are doing signage now at all of our facilities, and we finished phase one. How many signs did we put up for?
It was a little over 260.
No, Mr. Fighton, we're going to have to have you up at the microphone.
Sorry.
Apologies. About 260 in phase one.
And so those are not e-paper, but they are new signage that have gone up at all of our bus stops, including bus shelters and just customer enhancements across the board for our communities.
This is still the same.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect.
We've got you both here. I'm wondering if you could decide between the two of you who wants to address that concern raised by the commissioner, by Commissioner Jepson about should you have known or did you know about these infrastructure challenges at the time you made the application? My understanding was a little bit different than that, but you might want to explain that why you got in this predicament with those e-readers in particular, as I understand it.
Thank you, Chair. Great question. I'm glad that I'm able to comment. So a lot of the e-papers can work either via an electrical connection or solar panels. And so if the solar panel is deemed not to be workable, they say to have that electrical connection. And it was actually Metro Transit that did an e-paper pilot and then gave us feedback that it wasn't a super positive result, something that the technology just wasn't there. And so that might not be the best answer, but it was what we ended up finding out about the e-paper, and then decided to go another route.
That was after application?
Correct.
So that was after application. That's what happened.
Does that help clarify?
Yeah, I was not, I don't think I was unclear
Okay.
or needed any
Okay.
more understanding about it. Yeah.
Well, it was a legitimate concern, I thought, that you should have a chance to address. And though you found this out after the application was filed, apparently.
Correct.
What I hear the chair.
Correct.
TAC chair saying, yeah. And so at the time you filed the application, you assumed that this technology would be available to allow you to enhance customer information to these e-readers.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Other questions? Thoughts about the main motion versus the option of having some funds remain with the region? People? Oh, let's take them one at a time, I guess. We got a motion and a second on the table. And any further discussion on the motion is made, which is in the form of the recommended motion in Action Transmittal 2025-18. All those in favor of adoption of Action Transmittal 2025-18 in its recommended form, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, wow. A tepid aye, but a unanimous aye, a unanimous sort of, okay, we'll go along with it this time. All right, the 2025-18 is approved. Thanks for being here, MVTA. Appreciate it. It was helpful to the conversation, and thank you, Member Hanson, for your explanations at the beginning. All right, we're on to 2025-19, which is the TIP, Public Comment Report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a little easier and quicker item here. So recommended motion here is that the Transportation Advisory Board accept the attached 2026 through 2029 TIP Public Comment Report. There were 8 comments received, and my council staff did respond to each of those comments. And then part 2 of that is recommend adoption of the draft 2026 through 2029 Transportation Improvement Program. So I know all of us are very familiar with that process. It happens every year. I'll open it up to questions.
Sure. Any questions for Chair McPherson on this matter? It's a 2-part recommended motion. Yes, Commissioner, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about, the comments around our plan, about how this,
Could you pull your microphone a little bit closer too, please?
yes. How does the TIP plan reflect the performance measures that have been adopted by TAB, but also in the new plan, the new Met Council, the Imagine 2050 plan?
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'll turn that over to maybe MnDOT or Met Council staff that want to respond to that one.
What are you looking for?
That was nice. I'm gonna work on the TPP.
Hello, Chair and members. I'm Molly McCartney with MnDOT at Metro District. So the TIP is part of this overall statewide transportation improvement program. So the Met Council's TIP also embodies everything else in the 7-county metro area, MnDOT, and any other federal transportation dollars. And we do look at our district and statewide, how performance measures for pavement condition, bridge condition. We're looking at other things for safety. All projects are consistent and compliant with that, and it's kind of an iterative process where we evaluate based on what new things are coming in year 4 of it. So it's consistent. I won't speak to the TPP and Imagine 2050, but it's consistent with our statewide multimodal transportation plan, which is our 5-year plan for Minnesota.
Mr. Chair,
Carlson.
And TAB members, Charles Carlson, Executive Director for MTS. We include performance measures and we adopt those, and then projects in the TIP are selected in part by the various agencies that program them to meet and advance those measures. So there's not necessarily a one-for-one tie, but there is a tie between the investments we make and the performance that we're targeting and then reaching through the TIP.
May I follow up
Commissioner, go
on
ahead.
that too? About, I guess, like, how do we scale or measure the quality of the projects that are proposed, I guess, that meet those goals? Because all of our goal, like, especially around the safety pieces, we haven't advanced much, like, we aren't even meeting our targets. So how are these projects going to help us meet our reduced goals of, like, fatalities, for example?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members, really there's a lot of different programming sources. So some projects are really set up explicitly around that. Others are asset preservation type projects that may have an element of safety. One of the things that is really important about the TAB's work is through the regional solicitation process is where we take a small portion of the funds, it's about 3% of the funds overall in transportation, that best advance the region's goals and set up a process to most explicitly address those head on. And so through the evaluation process that's underway, one of the priorities we've heard from this body and have translated into that work is actually a new category that's specifically about safety that would address those elements with discretionary funds, as well as funds that are already federally programmed for safety that goes through the highway safety improvement process. So that's an example where there's a couple different sources that come together with the explicit outcome of of meeting that goal, in this case, safety. Other funds and other projects certainly include those elements as they're doing the scoping and their implementation process.
Mr. Chair, and I'll add to that too, from the technical side of things, one way to get at your question about how do we measure that, how do we evaluate that? One item in that Met Council staff and the Technical Advisory Committee staff have talked about is a before and after study, and looking at the applications that came through, the projects that were selected, and going back and looking at those specific corridors or bike pedestrian projects or even the transit projects that were implemented, and getting into that, fine-tooth comb level and looking at those specific projects to see if something did come out of that, if there was a benefit. Because again, this is a large bucket of money, but when you funnel that down to the projects, on the roadway side, it's 8 to 10 projects, and then transit and bike. So looking at the region as a whole, there's a lot of things that come to play there. And so if we try and focus in on what the council spent the money on, how has that impacted it? Has it got us towards the goals? Does that make sense?
Yes, but are we doing that already then? Like doing that evaluation of pre and post project?
So, Mr. Chair, member, some of that has been done. I know Steve Peterson, we've done some of that work 3 times. Yeah, so that evaluation's been done 3 times. Steve, how has that turned out? Fantastic for Anoka County. Everybody else is hurting, right? A slow walk.
Yeah, everybody's leaving now, great. Thanks, Mr. Chair, members. Yeah, so we've done 3 before and after studies on the solicitation projects. And to tell you the truth, that's informed where we're going on the solicitation, safety being the primary area. We found that MnDOT's Highway Safety Improvement Program, very targeted funds and application that just focused on safety was the best way to get those safety results. And that came from the before and after study. So we're making good use of that and plan to do that. It's every 2 to 3 years that we do those types of studies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I would still say and point to, our goals, like comparing our goals and the actuals, that we are still falling behind on what our goals are.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, member, I think, and that's a key part of this regional solicitation revamp that we're doing right now, is trying to tie some of these key goals in our TPP back to where the funding's going. So I know you've heard some of that discussion and some of the work that's going on, but as Steve mentioned, using these before and after studies to direct where the funds are, setting up the buckets of money, the types of projects that would receive funding.
Mm-hmm.
That's the overarching goal of that whole program. So, yeah.
Elaine has a comment as well.
As a follow up to what you're mentioning, the regional solicitation will be brought before TAB next month as the first drafts come through. So you'll get to see where the emphasis areas are being shown in this reevaluation for the next application process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I would just make a comment that, that's just only a small percentage, of the overall dollar of the overall investments that are going into our infrastructure and meeting that goals. And so I would just highly encourage that, the TIP actually helps us move forward in meeting our goals.
Great point.
Yeah, okay. Other questions? Member Vaughn?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. There we go. It's good to hear that there's been some short-term before and after, looking at projects, sounds like particularly in the kind of state highway safety aspect of it. I'm curious, has there ever been any sort of longer range analysis of what the overall financial picture of these projects are? Okay, so we build something or we improve it or widen it. That creates ongoing maintenance needs. Eventually that's going to have to be reconstructed. Okay, we get the money through regional solicitation to do the initial project, but you don't necessarily get the money on the back end for the asset management. Do we have any sense on like return on investment on on a long range basis on some of the projects that we've undertaken?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, member, that's a great question. I can speak on behalf of Anoka County system and how we evaluate that. To your point there about long range, what do we get? What's the bang for the buck when we spend this on projects? We do look at that, and we actually look at that as we're developing projects. For example, when you do a roadway project and you're going to invest in curb and gutter, new storm sewer systems, sidewalk, trails, all of that. There's a cost participation aspect of that, which is a whole nother broad category we could spend hours on. But then there's also the upkeep and maintenance of that. What's the benefit to the public, putting those facilities in the right location? It's hard to answer in a few sentences, but yes, it is an aspect that we all look at. And I know at the Met Council level, they're continuing to look at that as well. And that's where a lot of that future need comes from. So you build these facilities, you have the centerline miles of roadway, lane miles, and they utilize that information to come up with what a budget picture is. The state does the same thing with their STIP as well. They know what their centerline miles are, what those impacts are, and all that information is really what guides future revenue requests and all of that. So yes, the answer is yes. Well, if you would like to get more detailed information, maybe we grab coffee sometime and we can spend maybe 16 hours together and I'll go over all that.
Just let me know when.
Yep.
Thanks, Member Vaughn. Anyone else? All right, yes, Member Marino.
I was looking at the document here, and on page A64, there's a line item for the C-Line Arterial Bus Rapid Transit. Since that project opened in 2019, it's $3.5 million for that. I just was wondering what's going on with that being included in here.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll turn that over to Charles here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and member. I can't speak definitively for Metro Transit, but what I suspect it is establishing permanent stations on Highway 55 that were implemented as temporary stations when light rail was planned to run on Highway 55. So this is a new phase of the C-Line project that had a very light touch in its initial build and would go back with more of the full standard shelter is what I believe that project entails.
Okay, thank you.
Member Lindeke.
I can't help myself, Mr. Chair. Thanks for calling on me, but I just wanted to say that 8 comments, I don't know how much money was spent on the engagement process, but I hope it wasn't very much because I know 3 of the people that wrote in, and 7 of them are worth reading and are very thoughtful comments, but that's just such a small number. The millions of people in the metro area, and we have 8 comments. That's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, we talked about that at the exec committee meeting too. It's the lowest number of comments, I think. Charles, you can opine on that, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's a low number this year. Really where folks have the most influence is through the transportation planning process versus this programming document. And so we had many times that number of comments when we were when we were soliciting feedback and then ultimately adopting the region's transportation policy plan through Imagine 2050. This is it's an important document. It's certainly one of the core deliverables that we develop and execute. But it's also, maybe a little less of a kitchen table type topic, the way that, at least in my mind, the transportation plan could be.
It is an inscrutable document, so that makes sense.
All right, thanks for that. I'm not sure we've even had a motion yet, so.
So moved.
Thank you, Member Workman. Commissioner, is there a second?
Second, Petrick.
Second by Petrick. Member Petrick, seconds. Commissioner Workman moves the adoption of 2025-19, which is the two-part recommended motion to accept the attached, accept the 2026 through 2029 TIP public comment report and recommend that the Metropolitan Council adopt the draft 2026-2029 Transportation Improvement Plan Program. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of Action Transmittal 2025-19 in its recommended form, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. That motion is approved and the action transmittal is adopted. All right, we are now on to 25-26.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the recommended motion on this one is to recommend to the tab that the Met Council release the draft 2050 TPP Amendment Number 2, which is the Aviation System Plan update for public review and comment. And staff did a nice job of summarizing the background and purpose of this item. So I'm just going to read word for word the first couple paragraphs here. The Met Council develops a long-range transportation plan, also known as the TPP or the Transportation Policy Plan, and updates it at least every 5 years as required by federal law. The Met Council adopted the most recent update of the TPP back in February of this year. In the past, the Aviation System Plan was a standalone, legislatively required state plan that was updated on a different schedule than the TPP. But with the adoption of the 2030 TPP in 2010, the two plans were merged together. Aviation is not a federally required element of the region's long-range plan, but is required under state statute. A minor update of the Aviation System Plan was included in the adopted 2050 TPP. However, in 2024, Council staff began working on a parallel process to more fully update the aviation plan and allow for a more thorough technical process with the appropriate regional partners. The technical process resulted in the attached proposed 2050 TPP Amendment Number 2, the Aviation System Plan update, as a replacement for those minor updates that were originally included in the 2050 TPP. So with that, I will mention that at TAC, we received a very nice presentation from Joe Whiting, which went into more detail on some of the specifics and highlights of that plan update. Very thorough, informative document. And with that, there was unanimous support for this. Very little conversation other than it was a lot of good information, good to know. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Chair McPherson on this matter? All right. Is there anyone who cares to move the recommended motion, which is that the Transportation Advisory Board recommend to the Metropolitan Council the release of the draft 2050 TPP Amendment Number 2 Aviation System Plan update for the, call it the 45-day public review period and comment?
So moved, go tell.
Second was?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion stated for 2025? Discussion, yes.
Yes, please. Thank you. Again, I have a question about the plan, probably not in this space.
Commissioner, we're getting a lot of noise from outside here. Will you pull that microphone close?
Yes. Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for this. I think it's really important for the public to know about the planning process and just for the comment period here. My question around our plan again in meeting our goals, especially around greenhouse gas emissions, is how are we as a planning and agency basically moving all of our programs and different work here, moving towards minimizing and decreasing the greenhouse gas emission, right? So, for example, having been on the board and also knowing about our investments in rail, for example, that we know that we can move people around more efficiently and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. When this, as it relates to aviation, we also know that produces much more, right? So how are we using our plans here to help advance minimizing greenhouse gas emissions.
Sure. So, Mr. Chair.
Would you restate the question too, please? There's unbelievable amount of noise coming here.
I think the question was, how are we utilizing our plans and planning process to ensure that we're meeting the region's goals to reduce greenhouse gas and vehicle miles traveled and those environmental impacts? And so with each of these plans that comes before us, just as this aviation plan update, there's aspects of the plan that talk about that. And whether it's, utilizing fuels that are less toxic to the environment, what have you, or they're more efficient fuels, those types of things are discussed in there. Also, just the planning of the airports, all of that. I don't know the real detailed specifics other than what I saw at the presentation. I'm not sure if Joe's in here.
Yeah,
right
Mr.
now.
Whiting's right there.
He's right behind me. Yeah, so batter up right here. Maybe you can answer some of that.
Chair Hovland and members, so with the aviation system plan, it's a little different than our other investment plans in the TPP. So it's not an investment plan, so we don't actually have any direct investments at the Met Council. With the aviation, we're guided with coordinating with our partners at MAC and the other municipal airports and ensuring that we do meet those goals. And one of the big focuses of this longer update was actually looking at our existing policies in the region and kind of tying them better with those new goals of the regional development guide, and specifically to greenhouse gas emissions. So aviation activity is very controlled by the federal government. The FAA has a lot of control over what, and essentially you can't tell, if you're a public airport that receives federal dollars, you cannot tell anyone they can't land or use your airport. But what we can do is we are actually working on coordinating with the council, with our partners, the Metropolitan Airports Commission and Greater MSP, is what's known as a Sustainable Aviation Fuel Hub. And that's really for our commercial aircraft to be utilizing biofuels and other sorts of fueling that will be sourced locally and actually blended and produced locally and then actually utilized at our MSP airport. And Delta is partnering with us in that as well. And so looking at commercial aviation, that's probably going to be your biggest benefit for reducing your greenhouse gas emissions. There's also other efforts working with our MnDOT aeronautics partners, what's known as their MEAN plan, which is the Minnesota Electric Aeronautical Network plan. And that's identifying regional airports and statewide airports, which will be targets for investments in electrification of aircraft actually using those airports. And that report's coming out later this year, but I believe multiple metro airports are actually targeted for some of the highest ability to actually start electrifying their aircraft fleet. So our plan itself isn't necessarily going to be investing in those, but what we can do and what we are doing is coordinating and connecting with our state and our other regional partners to ensure that we're moving in that right direction. And this plan is really helping us set that stage for that, thinking about more in the future oriented than maybe we were in the past.
Right, and I understand that, so that's why I'm asking these questions about how does this plan help us advance that in a lot of our partnerships and signaling to partners about where priorities are. And also about, I don't know if the plan advises or encourages about when to fly, because as we heard from the MPCA, I feel like I barely had a summer this year because of the air quality alerts that we've had, right? And so are we advising about when we shouldn't be flying? I don't know. That's a very, as if we continue to get more air quality alerts like this, are we going to add on with more planes,
So Chair and members, as we really don't have the power to say when we can or can't fly. I guess as I mentioned again, a public use airport, you can land there anytime you want. The MAC does have noise abatement policies, so it's not necessarily air quality specific, but noise abatement policies that are voluntary for those regional airports and mandatory at the MSP airport. Not really anything necessarily to air quality, but in the grand scheme of things, aviation is very, very small amount of both GHG and other air and our particulate matter. And so, you could tell a million people to fly less, but likely those impacts wouldn't really be comparable to, say, driving and things like that. And so we definitely are working to ensure that the aircraft that are flying are going to be less impactful. But again, we are limited what the federal government allows us to do. And so this plan does, again, focuses in connection to coordinating with our partners to kind of get us in that right direction. And those policies are really oriented towards thinking about that. And also looking at potentially some future maybe study items that we at the council can lead, thinking about how aviation can evolve in the future and support our goals in our regional development guide.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yeah, Member Marino.
Just kind of touching a little bit on some of the impacts with that. Is the airports and their pollution with it, I know there's limitations on who can land and stuff, but with the cumulative impacts law being passed for environmental pollution for the state, is that going to be taken into consideration for things like flight or approach paths and stuff, or how is that going to be considered?
Chair and members. So actually, yes, the GHG reduction law that's in place does also include non-surface transportation, and that does include aviation activity in the state as a whole. It doesn't single out the metro area. It's a statewide target. And so flight approach and things like that, especially at MSP, are very controlled by the FAA again. And one thing the FAA is actually doing right now is what's known as their RNAV policy. I couldn't tell you what it stands for off the top of my head, but essentially what it's doing is replacing the old radar systems at MSP with new geographic database systems. So the planes are essentially guided by GPS, satellite technology, rather than those old radars from the 50s. So what that does do is it allows for the approach patterns and departure patterns to be a lot more specific and very clearly, and that, essentially you'll have the planes following those paths perfectly, rather than maybe a little more dispersed in the past, where it's kind of a little more guesswork with the radars, right, and not so specific. But that, I wouldn't say. I mean, they're always maximizing, fuel use. So they don't want to, they're minimizing how much fuel they're going to use, because obviously the airlines are going to be, very, they're going to be wanting to reduce their fuel use anyway, and so the FAA is working with them to do so. But generally, I would say at that level, they're not necessarily thinking about that as they're developing these patterns. I think the noise impacts are going to be the biggest factors, and you'll see. With this RNAV process, I can send a link out if the FAA's got a website, but essentially what they're trying to do is mimic the existing patterns again to limit those noise impacts, because generally your biggest noise impacts are going to be when the planes are right above you, and so they want to limit, specific people just having planes fly over them every day, every time, the same time it's done. So those noise impacts are going to be the biggest considerations, but there are those GHG reduction targets in the statewide GHG targets. I don't know if that answers your question.
Mr. Mino, would you use the microphone, please? It's really hard to hear.
Sorry. Yeah, so I was more referring to the NPCA cumulative impacts law, not the GHG impacts law. That's for past and current pollution and other stressors and how they impact the health, well-being, and quality of life of residents in impacted communities. Is that something that's being taken into account for these studies?
Could you
Chair,
restate the question, Joel, please?
Chair, members, Marino was asking about the cumulative impacts law in the state MPCA, and specifically with those environmental review requirements on airport projects. And so generally every airport plan, so as we've seen, I think last month we came through the Flying Cloud long-term airport plan. Those are kind of your long-term plan documents similar to your city comprehensive plans. And once those are approved and adopted at the MAC or our municipal partners, then generally most improvements in that plan will need to then go through a full environmental review period. That'll include an EAW, which is where you see those cumulative impacts. That'll include your environmental assessments and potentially an environmental impact statement, which are those federal level environmental guides. And so generally, yes, every project is going to have to go through that environmental review period, and that includes considerations of past projects and that cumulative impact process. And so generally, with MSP, we'll probably be seeing that environmental review period kick off for the plan that was approved last year in the next year or two. And then that process will then include those cumulative impact considerations and documentation.
Okay. Thank you.
It might be beneficial for the tab for you to explain what our general oversight abilities are at the tab or at the Met Council relative to the operations of the MAC.
Chair and commissioners. So our general oversight is all built in state law, as we were mentioning earlier. Is generally so at the regional system level. At the council, we are tasked with reviewing what's known as long-term comprehensive plans, which the airports are then also required to update and regularly update throughout their airport planning process. And those come through comes to the tab to then give a recommendation to the full council to then approve those plans, and then what Those then go back to the MAC to be adopted, then move on to the environmental review period. At the staff level, we do still have additional review and coordination with the MAC when those environmental reviews go through. We don't have any statutory authority really to stop the environmental review, but we do have a lot of coordination and insight in the development of those documents, and they do come through us for our review as well, through our our environmental review level of the airport planning process, which is identified in this plan as well. It's kind of a circular process. Again, the federal government has a lot more control and impact with aviation than other forms of transportation, and so they're generally very, very closely coordinated with the FAA and other federal agencies who review and then ultimately are the approver of those federal environmental review documents.
And I think don't we have review and approval authority on their capital improvement plan too?
Correct, Chair. We do also have the capital improvement plan comes through every year. That generally comes in about January, December, so we'll come back in December and we'll be able to review that. That's a higher level review of that 7-year CIP for the MAC airports only. But it does also allow us, and there's also a mechanism, there's certain types of projects which come through that process then which need to be formally approved by the council. So last year, a small runway extension at Lake Eola Airport had to come through the process because it's extending a runway. And so there's 7 types of different projects. I could rattle them up, but we don't need to necessarily now. But there's certain types of projects that we do then have to actually approve, and then generally we approve that CIP every year as well.
Okay.
And I also note that in that approval process, we also note and document where those environmental reviews have taken place, and then where those can be found if you'd like to look at those as well as you look at those CIPs as they come through.
And Ms. Smith, you may want to comment if you know about the efforts underway around sustainable fuel production in Minnesota in conjunction with air travel.
Chair and members, I know that there's an interagency work group going on right now, but beyond that, I don't have a lot of details. I did, if it's okay, want to address the question about the cumulative impacts regulations that was raised. So the cumulative impacts statute that was passed by the legislature in the 2023 session regulates facilities that have air pollution permits with the agency, with the MPCA, and so it actually doesn't directly impact the airport.
Thank you for that clarification. I was assuming the cumulative impacts in the actual environmental documents. But
all right. Any further discussion? Yeah, Chair.
Mr. Chair, real quick here, I want to invite Cole up here, seeing as this is the second amendment to the TPP. Just give him an opportunity to give a brief update on the TPP itself and add anything on that. So we'll be brief. I know time is ticking away here.
I just wanted to share some exciting news with you. So as we noted, the TPP was adopted in February of this year. We're actually getting close to having printed copies. So hopefully by next month, might be able to bring some copies for TAB members to take away. But of important note, we're not going to include this aviation system plan in the first print of those because we have this whole updated chapter moving forward. And concurrently at the same time, we're working on an interactive TPP website. We'll get Elaine to share a link out to that when it's live. Really helps you navigate the plan in a more functional way than having to flip through what's ultimately going to be about a 500-page document. So we'll be sharing some more materials on that moving forward, and I think it's just you guys are gonna like it. It's gonna look a lot more polished than the versions that you saw previously, and should be coming hopefully within a month. Don't quote me on that, but that's our hope. So.
All right, thanks, Cole. Thanks, guys. All right, we've got a motion and a second to adopt recommended motion 2025-20 or adopt action transmittal 2025-26 in its recommended motion form. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of 2025-26 in its recommended motion form, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. That action transmittal is adopted and approved. And then we are on to 2027, or 25-27, I should say.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this recommended motion is that the Transportation Advisory Board recommend adoption of the attached 2026 Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP. So each year they go through a work program or a work plan on the projects and studies that they're going to undertake in the future, and so that's what's included in the plan. It went through funding and programming and TAC without much comment, so we were all unanimously supportive of this.
Question for Chair McPherson on this matter? Okay. Is there a motion?
Right here.
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Wagenfeld.
Questions about two of the items on the work program. The first was the Midtown Greenway bicycle and pedestrian trail expansion planning project. This was in the 2025 planning work program. And the schedule said it would be completed between the fourth quarter of 2024 and the fourth quarter of 2025. It seems as though the timeline has been moved back for that. I was wondering if there could be like a clarification on when that study will be done. And then if there could be like a brief update on the Metropolitan Highway System Harms Impacts and Mitigation Priority Study.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'll see if Cole wants to add on that one.
Sure. Call Brenda on the second question, but again, Cole Henniker, Met Council staff. The Midtown Greenway study kicked off in 2024, late 2024. I think the intent was to try to finish it by the end of this year. We just included it in next year's in case the project runs a few months into, it has to be in this document for us to spend federal dollars in that calendar year. I think right now we're anticipating it will be done probably between December and February, so within the next 6 months or so. And so that's why it's in there, just to give us a cushion in case it goes long. But yeah, it's about 2/3 of the way done at this point. And then for the highway harms, so let me.
Sure. The highway harm, Mr. Chair, members, Amy Benowitz with the council. The highway harms study kicked off last November.
No, that's okay. I was just.
Oh, I thought you were saying you couldn't hear me.
I want to have him have his 2 cents.
We formed a highway harms policy group that is made up of representatives of community organizations, and they have met on 2 occasions. They have their 3rd meeting coming up in September. We have a technical advisory committee of city and county representatives. I believe they have met twice. They have a meeting coming up next week. So at this point, we're really talking about issues, identifying harms, categories of harms, and beginning to select pilot corridors to look at for the levels of harms that they have been impacted by.
Quick follow-up question.
Yes, go ahead.
When will the first public engagement opportunity for that study be?
I'll have to get, Mr. Chair, members, I'll have to get back to you on that. The primary level of engagement with that study is with community-based organizations. We will have some what I call general public engagement, but most of it is focus groups and more, as I said, organizationally focused outreach.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Mr. Hanson, anything you wanted to add supplementally? I was almost tempted to have you come up and make your presentation, but we'll hold on for a moment here. Chair, go ahead. Anything further?
Yeah,
All right.
Mr. Chair, nothing further. I think just for the sake of time, and we still
All
got
right.
some agenda items ahead of us, we'll forego the presentation.
With respect to 2025-27, did we have a motion? I can't remember. No.
So moved.
All right. Mayor Stephenson moves. Was there a seconder?
Second.
Oh.
Sorry.
All right. The duelers in the corner on the second. All right, we got a motion and a second by Member Chowdhury to adopt the action transmittal 2025-27 in its recommended motion form. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of action transmittal 2025-27 in its recommended form, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Action transmittal 2025-27 is adopted in its recommended form. And then we've got one more to go here, 2025-28, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this one here, the recommended motion is that the TAB approve St. Paul's program year extension request to move its Arlington Avenue sidewalk project from 2026 to 2027. Real quick background on this, they applied and received $920,000 through the 2022 regional solicitation for sidewalk enhancements along the north side of Arlington Avenue from Westminster to Arkwright Street. And since that time, they've also added some additional, they also programmed a roadway improvement project along that same corridor with local funds. And so to align those two projects to maximize efficiency, they're asking for a one-year request, one-year extension request from 26 to 27. Again,
she's gone.
We're supportive of that request. So open it up to questions or comments on that.
All right, questions?
I'll move it, Mr. Chair. Go tell.
All right, is there a second?
Sean.
All right, we got a motion and a second on this matter. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of adoption of action transmittal 2025-28 in its recommended form, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The action's approved. 2025-28 is adopted. And just, I love the curiosity of the group. Elaine had us down for 10 minutes for all that work.
40 minutes. 40 minutes.
40 minutes, excuse me. We still blew by that too. Anyway, let's move on now to the presentations, the informational portion of the agenda. And we're going to talk a little bit about micromobility. Folks had questions and comments about that earlier. And, we're going to bring Charles Carlson up to introduce the topic. And we've got Matt fighting with us again here to from MVTA to talk about some of those mobility improvements created by micromobility.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Charles Carlson filling in for Bradley Bobbitt today. I'll introduce this topic, as the chair noted, and turn it over to Matt. So the thing about microtransit, we've already had a little bit of conversation today about microtransit, but every provider in the region operates some level of microtransit. Southwest Prime began this in the region, or Southwest Transit introduced Prime in the region in 2015. So about 10 years ago was the first example regionally here, and Metro Transit began its expansion, or its first pilot in 2022, leading to last Saturday's opening of the fifth zone that is in operation in Metro Transit system. But other providers have this as well, as Matt will note. This is a new tool. Some kind of shared taxi type service has existed for well over 100 years. What made this possible was this tool. The cell phone technology, the ubiquity of cell phone, smartphone service, and the rise of shared ride services like Uber and Lyft introduced the confluence of technologies that makes a new tool in the transit toolbox available to providers, and we've begun that in the last 10 years. Of note, this is a coverage tool. It is not a every corner, every trip. We're replacing the transit system. It's geometrically not possible to do that. This is a coverage tool for some areas. It allows access locally to the system. It provides connections to fixed route. It provides coverage service for local travel options within a community. And as such, it is a flexible tool. It serves these different roles. It does it well. It's also an on-demand service, and the table, or the numbers here show how it fits in against other types of services. So at the one hand, arterial BRT is carrying about 45 people an hour per hour of bus service that's on the street. General public dial-a-ride, typically in rural areas, is about 1.4. Other services that provide bus service are somewhere in between. And microtransit is, on that coverage end of the spectrum, where it's about providing access, it's about providing trips, it's about serving communities with transit where fixed route service would not be possible, efficient, or cost-effective. And so microtransit's an exciting tool because it brings that into the region as something that's possible that wasn't possible before because the technology did not exist in a way that made it efficient, cost-effective, or attractive for riders. So as we're bringing this forward and as providers are getting more and more experience with it, within our program as the planning organization, we have begun a study that is supporting a conversation and a collaboration amongst all the transit providers. What have you learned? What has been your experience in 10 years or 3 years or 5 years in running this type of service? What would you do the same? What would you do different? What we want this to be is a tool that providers can use to design their systems, that providers can use to work together on issues that we may have in common. What we don't want this to be is a directive policy to providers on what they must do. Instead, it's a convening of the providers to deploy best practices based on their experiences, and to identify work items that they may have in common going forward to optimize the role of this type of service within the suite of services that each provider offers. So this is guided in our plan, and there's really three principles that we're approaching with this: improving the rider experience, providing guidance and policy direction or context for providers as they make decisions on where this makes sense or doesn't make sense to provide, and then the balance that is always in place in these conversations of flexibility and shared regional goals. How do we best accomplish that through this study? We're excited to bring the study forward as it continues. But today is really about some of the basics of what the service is and how it works. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Charles. Appreciate that.
Charles.
Chair Evelyn, members, Matt Fine once again with MBTA. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of the services that we have here in the region for microtransit. A little bit about my background. I am with MBTA, but I also serve as the STA rep on TAC, and I also worked at Southwest Transit for quite a number of years, so I have something to do with the start of all of this. So I guess that's probably why I was kind of selected among the providers to discuss microtransit as well. So as Charles did a nice job pointing out kind of the basics of the service, it is an app-based ride-hailing service similar to Uber and Lyft. I always like to look at microtransit as being, we have dollar riders to taxis, as microtransit is to Uber and Lyft, or TNCs. It's just kind of the next evolution. But it does, as Charles pointed out, serve a very helpful niche, I'll say, in the transit fabric in our region. So it does provide services that are lower cost for riders than obviously the private providers. Our general cost per rider or fare to the rider is generally about $3 to $5, depending on the service. If you were to get comparable services with Uber and Lyft, you could expect to pay $20, $30, possibly more dollars per trip. So it still very much is serving that transit need. As Charles noted, connects to fixed route transit for both local and regional mobility. It mostly is operating in suburban environments, but as you'll see, it is always expanding, especially with Metro Micro expanding their program into different areas in the urban core or urban areas as well as predominantly the suburban providers having their own services. I've got a call at 3:30. I gotta be on. So just visually, where microtransit sits within the region, we do have all the 5 providers, the 4 suburban providers: MBTA, Southwest Transit, Plymouth Metrolink, Maple Grove MyRide, and then Metro Micro Metro Transit's program operating in the region. We currently have 11 zones. That will be the case starting in September with the addition of the Metro Micro Blaine service, covering now 299.9. We can say 300 square miles. It's 299.9 square miles of service of zone coverage, I will say, in the region. And in 2024, just a little bit over almost 470,000 rides provided in 2024. We expect that number to continue to grow, as you'll see, as this is very much an expanding service in the region. So talking about regional ridership growth, we can see as services, matured and more came online, since 2019, the last 5 years, service is actually up ridership-wise 154% since pre-pandemic. You can see we did have a dip in the pandemic years, but also what is of note is that this type of services became more honestly in demand during the pandemic years because people were looking for, for social distancing. This catered itself to that type of services. People were looking for more localized rides as they were not going into taking longer haul routes into the urban core. So from a suburban context, we certainly saw an increase in adoption during this time period and actually grew the services during that time period. And now we're seeing that growth just as we continue in a post-pandemic era where these services continue to gain popularity. As noted earlier, it's a tool in the toolbox of transit. It is relative cost per passenger. This is taking data from the 2023 regional route analysis that's done annually among all the providers. You can see the cost per passenger falls in that space between the your suburban local buses, and then also you have your Metro Mobility ADA service, and then also just general dial-a-ride service, where there's different characteristics to each service type. Microtransit is really looking to be that more on the ready, on demand type service, whereas a general dial-a-ride service is going to be more of a scheduled ride, possibly a standing order that needs to occur. More people with higher needs utilizing those services, where microtransit can be viewed more as kind of your general public, hey, I need a ride now within these zones type of service. And so that's where you're going to see some of that efficiency gained. Most of the services, I believe all the services, are actually a shared ride service, so it isn't just pick up one passenger, go to the next location. The algorithms and the software behind the services batch rides in real time, making sure that there's as efficient of operation as possible in terms of picking up multiple passengers and balancing the time that they're on the bus. There's a lot of, I'll say, changes you can make in the background that each service provider can kind of tailor to whatever their service goals are for that service. Just want to highlight for TAB just a quick summary of all the types of services that are out there in the region right now. So we'll start with Plymouth Metrolink, their City of Plymouth Click and Ride is their program. They are service areas primarily the entire city of Plymouth, but they can ride to certain locations in Minnetonka, Wayzata, Golden Valley, Medina, Hamel, Maple Grove. So that's one of the characteristics of these types of services. You can select your zones where you want them to be and make sure that you're meeting the needs of your communities in that way. They operate their services, looks like Monday through Sunday, for most of the, from 5 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. and then 6 a.m. to 6:30, and then Sunday with a little less time there. They charge $3 per trip, and their growth plans are for following the recommendations of they're doing a Northwest service provider study between the cities of Maple Grove and Plymouth, looking for primarily consistent wait times and consistent on-time arrivals. Maple Grove Transit, their program is called My Ride. So again, their service area, primarily the entirety of the city of Maple Grove, but you can ride to locations outside as well in their area: Osseo, Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, Robbinsdale, Crystal, Plymouth, Rogers, and trip starts and ends, and if the trip starts and ends in Maple Grove. Their off days and hours of operation, Monday through Friday, 5:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., and Saturday, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. And they are the same as Plymouth in that they have a $3 trip as well, and multi-trip passes can bring down costs down to $2 on their service. And just noting, I just didn't do it on the Plymouth slide, but just noting their annual ridership growth. They, like Plymouth, are one of the more mature services, I'll say, in terms they've been around prior to 2019, so about 10% increase in service since 2019 as it relates to ridership. MBTA, our service, MBTA Connect, is a little newer. This service started in 2019, so that's why you see the ridership growth being so exponential compared to the others, but still now providing, I believe, the most trips of any provider in 2024 at 158,000, which would stand to reason given its larger service area, as it does serve the entirety, almost the entirety of MBTA service area. There's 3 separate zones in their service area right now, our service area: Burnsville, Apple Valley, Savage, parts of Rosemont. Egan has their own zone unto themselves. And then this year we started service in Shakopee and Prior Lake zones as well. That's not covering the entirety of all those cities, but I would say it's about 90% of our service area that's covered at this point, with plans to grow to the entire service area. Service operates Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., and we can service 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. as well. For the main zone and Egan zones, Shakopee Prior Lake is just weekday only for right now. Also a $3 fare for this service. Plans include growing to the entire service area, merging zones so that it's a little less complicated, making it an easier rider experience as the service continues to grow, and expand our EV fleet for the service as well. Then we also have Metro Transit, which is the Metro Transit micro service. Has 3 zones, 2 more to be added, with Bloomington being added and then Blaine as well in this fall. We have the North Minneapolis area zone, Roseville area zone, which is portions of Roseville, Arden Hills, Shoreview. They have the Woodbury area, portions of Woodbury, Lake Elmo, and Oakdale. We discussed the Blaine and Bloomington zones. They operate 5:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then weekends 7 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. A little bit different fare structure for Metro Micro, $2.50 for non-rush and $3.25 during rush hours, with their growth plans to add 4 additional zones by the end of 2027, as well as improved fixed route integration. And then you can see the ridership increases with the service started in 2022. Significant ridership increases, and we would expect that to continue as they expand zones. Last but not least, Southwest Transit with their Southwest Prime program. Their service area is one full zone that is the city boundaries of Eden Prairie, Chaska, Chanhassen, Carver, and Victoria, where you can ride to locations outside of the Southwest Prime service area as well, to Edina, Shakopee, Normandale Community College. Used to be the airport. They added a fixed route service, which is one of the ways I should say that this type of services look to inform what future fixed route services will be. So with Southwest Transit having probably the most mature type of service, they're already looking and implementing some of those opportunities where fixed route starts to make some sense. Their days and hours of operation are 5:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then Saturdays they operate from 6 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Fares are a little bit different there with the $5 general fare, and then senior 65 and plus ride for $3. Looking to grow their service to the north as they were awarded in 2022 regional solicitation to areas of St. Louis Park, Edina, Minnetonka, Plymouth, and then increasing days and times of service in their primary service area. Got through that as fast as I hoped I could have, but any questions from the board?
Member Linda Key, then Member
Thank
Hubbard.
you, Mr. Chair. Does any of the agencies collect any demographic information about who uses the microtransit, specifically income? Just generally, because there is a service, Uber private service, that does all this stuff that you just said, cheaper for, in general for the public. But then this is cheaper for the riders. But I'm curious, what are the rider population compared to the overall population?
Yeah, so I certainly can't speak for all the service, certainly, but I can speak through my experience with both Southwest program as well as MBTA's program, and we have done surveying of riders for demographic information. I say it very much falls in those services. I'd say leans more towards a transit-dependent population, where generally you're looking at lower-income individuals that wouldn't be able to afford that type of service. It skews a little bit more gender-wise, females versus males, similar to most public transit, and also a little bit more towards seniors as well.
Just follow up, is that data that you have, or is that?
Yes, I could. We have some survey information.
How do you get it?
Just essentially onboard surveys. We've also worked with our app vendors as well, that they'll provide surveys out to via the apps as well.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Member Hubbard. Then
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, just so much of a comment, because I know it was discussed earlier in regards to microtransit and, just some of the fear and discussion over, is it going to kind of take away from those fixed bus routes? Being one of the member cities of Southwest Transit, we found that microtransit is a really great equitable solution. A lot of our riders that use microtransit, oftentimes we used to have it as a separate entity, but they did consolidate together with microtransit with the medical piece of things. I know you touched on that just in your presentation. But we found that, that door-to-door service really fills a need for folks that need to get to their medical appointments. That is a little bit obviously filling a different need from the fixed bus routes. Just in regards to kind of the layout geographically within our communities and just where things are at, we find that microtransit, at least at this point in the suburban nature of our city layouts, is a really great tool. And as he had mentioned, it's great to also see where we could possibly have more of a fixed bus route, as he touched on with the airport, because that was something that was more of a microtransit tool. And there were, several riders that would ride together to the airport, so it wasn't as if they were generally taking one rider at a time. So there was a little bit of an economical piece to that. But now that that is a fixed bus route, it opens up an opportunity. And I will say, I think the future, at least in the Southwest Transit terms, is that they want to expand it to the more rural communities in the western edge of our county, which is really imperative and important for that mobility piece in our community.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On your MVTA numbers, do those ridership numbers include any special event? Or, is this Like State Fair, do you,
Oh, no,
or Renaissance Festival, or is this just,
yeah, just, Member Holberg, this is just for the microtransit service ridership, so not overall system ridership.
so you don't offer microtransit for special events at all?
No, we're generally, at least I can speak for MBTA, when we're looking at the microtransit or at special event service, that's really going to be, as Charles mentioned, this is really a kind of a coverage tool that a lot of providers use, where special event service, we're going to be looking at more ridership based, making sure we're meeting needs that way. So it's going to be a bigger bus that we're using.
Thank you.
Member Marino, and then we'll go to Member Chenitz.
Yeah, just want to touch on cost per passenger and service type, because there's very different types of microtransit service that we're operating. Like most of the Metro Transit ones are in about a 15 square mile area. Plymouth and Maple Grove are about 35 square miles, and Southwest Transit and MVTA are much larger. They have different demands as far as like how many vehicles you're going to need, how much time each ride is going to take, because you could go from one end of the system to the other with the same amount of cost, and how much time it takes the vehicle to get to the person. Is there any breakdown as far as like a little more detail as far as like where we're seeing the subsidies for the different types of programs instead of just one number?
So certainly that information will be in the regional route profile information that's compiled by the Met Council. So that's all online, and you'd have that breakdown by provider as well. So it's happy to answer it in greater detail, maybe in an offline conversation, because it can get pretty technical, but that information is available online.
Yeah, I definitely would be love to connect on that, just because currently the latest data on that is from 2023, and this is incorporating some data from 2024. It'd be interesting to see that. Also, something I would like to see kind of in the future too is more touching on what is the rejection rate between the different types of services. Yeah, I know for Metro Transit, I believe if it's like a 30-minute service wait, like that they'll just kind of refuse that, or people will cancel a trip. And the other thing would be the rate of time that vehicles are in use. I'd like to see more details on that.
Yep. And that's obviously going to be based provider to provider. They're going to have their own metrics and their own goals that they're setting on that front. So that's something that I know that data does exist, but it's going to be a provider to provider decision on that.
Member Barber, then Member Chenitz, and then Member Hanson.
Very quickly, Mr. Chair, some of that information.
Would you pull your microphone close, please?
Some of that information, like the ridership and the subsidy.
Still can't hear you very well.
What?
Is that working?
Struggling today. Sorry, it keeps turning off.
That might be the explanation. It just doesn't work.
It keeps turning off on us. So, okay, back where I was. So a lot of the information about ridership and even subsidy per ride and all of that, like even if you look at Metro Micro, until this year we had one. So it's like not direct comparisons. And I think we're going to take a couple of years to really get something that we think we can compare apples to apples, kind of how I described some of the service areas earlier, where ours connect to, these high frequency transit routes versus what, in my community, it might be going to the doctor or the grocery store. It's just, there are different same service, sometimes different purposes depending on where they are. And as far as for special events, in theory, you could take Metro, or you could take the microtransit to the place that, like, going the Renfest or the State Fair is going from. So, yeah.
All right, thanks for that. Member Chenitz.
So this might be a stupid question, but what constitutes a ride? So it's 466,643 ridership numbers for 2024.
Mm-hmm.
How do you count ridership? Is that per person or is that per trip? Or?
Yep, no, very valid question. And yeah, it's generally looked at per person that gets on the bus. So, it's when a person gets on the bus, getting from point A to point B, that's going to be one ride.
Member Hanson.
Matt, would you comment on the use of electric vehicles for this service?
Certainly, I can certainly speak to. I know the Southwest Transit, has been operating electric vehicles as part of their microtransit service. Us at MBTA, in the last year, we introduced 5 E-Just micro buses. They're called. Maybe I don't remember, Hanson, if there's been photos shared or whatever. We're happy to share that information, but has been a very productive form of type of vehicle for our service. certainly reducing costs overall in the service and also meeting the needs of our riders. And it also has the range and the ability to fulfill the service needs of the service with the range that's provided with those vehicles. So it's something that we at MBTA are certainly looking to expand our EV fleet, and I know other providers are as well for this type of service.
Good. Mr. Lewis, Member Lewis.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I see that there's a difference in fare depending on the service. Can you speak to what you know about the difference and maybe why that is depending on which provider is offering the service?
I can certainly speak to it's as it stands in the region at this point. It's up to each provider to determine their own fare for microtransit. I think as some of this discussion and as a member Barber mentioned, this is an evolving service within the region. So there are discussions at a regional level discussing this at this very moment about a potential fare structure. I'd say where they'll stand right now is still, I think Charles did a nice job of explaining where each provider on the study is. We're still determining what the right set of guidelines that will eventually maybe evolve into policy, and I think the same thing can be said about fare structure as well. So there's some autonomy with fares, but we also acknowledge that there is going to be a benefit to having a more unified, simple fare structure done in the future.
Thank you.
Member Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we all have the same fare equipment on all the different vehicles, so you can also easily transfer from one system to the other. Excellent.
All right, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
We're trying to get to the, this is our normal quit time, so I want to make sure that we get this one last presentation in here. Minnesota Go Vision update. We got Whitney Mason with us from MnDOT to give us a quick update on Minnesota Go.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everyone. I realize it's getting late, and so we'll give you the quick version. My name is Whitney Mason. I'm the statewide multimodal transportation plan coordinator for MnDOT. And I'd also like to introduce Brad Utek back here, who is the statewide planning manager for MnDOT. So we are here. If I stand here, can you hear me rather than bend over? Is this okay? All right, thank you. We are here because we're updating our transportation vision for the state of Minnesota. So we all wanted you all to know about that. We want your help in updating the vision, primarily by promoting our survey. So I'm going to back that slide up and raise your hand. Did you know that we have a statewide transportation vision for the state of Minnesota? That's great. A lot of people I talk to, even transportation professionals at MnDOT, do not know this. So that's part of our mission, is to let people know that. It sets a tone for all the rest of the work we do. So does anyone want to hazard a guess what that is? You can paraphrase. If not, I'll tell you in just a moment. Minnesota's multimodal transportation system maximizes the health of people, the environment, and our economy. So this was developed in 2011 with a lot of input from a lot of people across the state. It has been almost 15 years. A lot has changed in the last 15 years, so we felt it was time for a refresh. We may not change the statement, but we at least want to hear from people and make sure that we're still on track. This will be early engagement that will inform the update of our next statewide multimodal transportation plan, which kicks off this coming January. So this informs the work of not only the SMTP, but our system and modal plans. So we're just in phase one right now. We're going to, normally with this presentation, we would ask people to take a survey. We all don't have time to do that today, but I am going to ask that you share this survey out through your channels. So I have provided the staff here with a handout that you can send electronically. Likewise, I'm going to pass these cards around. If you like, take one. It has the QR code that links to our Let's Talk Transportation page and survey. It has my contact information on the back. So we do hope to have our vision adopted by next spring. This first round of engagement is very high level, and it's going to inform the second phase of engagement, which is scenario-based planning. So our goal is ambitious. We hope to connect with 3,000 plus Minnesotans. We'll have MnDOT staff hopefully separate of that number. That is huge for a statewide effort, and it is actually, we're on track. We're doing really well. We're working hard, and it's happening. We are coordinating with other statewide plans that are updating right now. We have the Greater Minnesota Transit Plan and the Bike Plus Plan that are updating right now, so we're trying not to duplicate efforts too much across the state. And we are providing multiple ways for people to take survey. So we are engaging at events, many of them in the metro area, about half of them statewide. We want to get a couple of engagements in every district across the state. We're doing handwritten surveys when we table at events. We also have, like I said, the Let's Talk Transportation link. We're trying to get people to take survey through that. We have 4 language translations. And we do Mentimeter survey typically in our presentations. So like in a normal, you're going to see a QR code as if we were presenting to one of our other groups here in a moment, where we would actually walk you through the Mentimeter survey with us. And then we're engaging with community-based organizations, largely here in the Twin Cities, for underserved representation. That's our Go Mobile. It works really effectively to draw people in, talk to us, kids color on the Go Mobile, and we pass out maybe a sticker in exchange for somebody taking a survey. I'll pass these around too. Feel free to take one if you like one. They're our Minnesota Go sticker, which represents not only the Minnesota Go vision statement, but also the SMTP and our modal and system plans. So there's an example of us at our event, and you'll see that card that's being passed around. This is something we use for maybe teenage engagement. They don't want to color on the Go Mobile. They maybe don't want to take a survey, but they can write a postcard to the future. It says, in 50 years, I want transportation in Minnesota to be open-ended response. Put it in the little mailbox you see there at the table. Put the flag up, addressed to the future. And I think Hallie Turner, if some of you know Hallie, came up with this idea. She said her favorite one's the one with chocolate on it. So there's a general representation of areas we'll hit across the state. That's not exactly up to date, but it's pretty close. So that's where we would do Mentimeter survey. We're not going to do that with you all here right now, but please, please take this survey when you have time, when you go home. Encourage other people to take it, anyone in Minnesota. And this is the handout you will receive electronically. So that information is what you can use to send out to stakeholders and ask them to participate. So that's really all I have for you right now. If you have questions, feel free to email. Feel free to ask right now.
Chair, are you going to be at the fair?
We are going to be at the fair with sort of not very direct representation, but we will have our Let's Talk Transportation board up there, and people will have an opportunity to provide input just very broadly about what's happening in the state.
Tabling or in a building?
MnDOT always has.
Okay, the MnDOT.
Yeah, MnDOT always has presence there, both in the Eco Experience building and then, where's our main table, Brad?
I'm not sure. Machinery Hill, near Machinery Hill, I think.
Near Machinery Hill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Ms. Mason, thanks for being here.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Thanks for your tenacity today. It was a long meeting.
Yours as
Stick around
well.
yeah. All right, quick update from me. I know all of us need to, half of us has already exited based on schedules. So from the policymaker work group, really great conversation today around this issue of, I'll put it this way, in the context of trying to base decisions on outcome that we want to see versus modes as we have in the past. We headed down the road of looking at these different categories of outcomes. So there was a reduction in those outcomes to safety, a safety category, a safety tranche, the dynamic and resilient category that had bike, ped, and transit and roadway in it, and then the environment, then this overlay of equity. And so as we've talked about this and we've proceeded through this sort of, I would say, logical sort of process that we're going through, this linear process, that the main goal is to determine now the funding area emphasis with that outcome-based approach. And so we had a really robust conversation around that today on ranges, no ranges, tightening up ranges on the on the outcomes themselves versus what we used to have for broader ranges on modalities, looking at the ranges that are potentially proposed here. We got over 100 technical people working on this project. And I think it was such a robust policy conversation today. I'm hopeful that we gave the technical people a little bit of guidance. I'm not quite sure we did, but they heard a lot of different concerns and views on things that involved minimums, maximums, and the folks that are on the table are really bright and very helpful and have had some great experiences that have really served us well in these conversations as we continue down this pathway of getting back to the tab by the end of the year with some recommendations around how we're going to do this if we're going to use an outcome-based sort of approach. So that's a quick update there. And Glenn is gone, and I turn to Member Martinson.
Thank you, Chair. So Glenn has asked me to give the brief update on the Active Transportation Work Group. We've been meeting monthly, trying to stay in sync with the Policymakers Working Group. In July, we met and discussed essentially financial considerations or funding considerations around, and we're going to make decisions about that, about what will be recommended to TAB at our meeting on Monday, the 25th. And those considerations have to do with whether or not we're going to ask that there be a local match for active transportation projects funded through the regional sales tax. That's what this is. That's what this working group is handling. Whether or not to have a match, and if so, if we have a match, if it'll be 5%, 10%, or 20%. We've also been discussing what project minimums and maximum amounts might look like, and whether all projects even require a minimum. We've got a list of project types that I don't know if we'll bring this to the group this month or not, but Glenn and I have been compiling a list of oddball projects, things that might not be expected or typical, but that we want to make sure we discuss so that they don't just fall between the cracks because they're not standard. And then the other decisions we have to make have to do with how much of the bank account that we have now we want to award in this next solicitation. It's going to be somewhere between $50 million and $70 million based on accruals of about $21 million a year. And then we funded $19 million in the pilot project that TAB approved last year. And then we've got also to decide about a reserves policy, about how much of that funding we want to keep in reserve. That's going to happen in August. And then in September and October, we're going to be doing more discussion. Hopefully, we're going to be getting the draft of the application materials and scoring criteria soon so that we'll be able to have that be reviewed and talked about by that work group. And we'll also be talking about geographic balance and solicitation timing for active transportation categories. One piece of news, we have our first completed project out of the pilot funding in Jordan, Minnesota. That project is going to be having a ribbon cutting on the 27th at 3 p.m. And I understand you're not able to make it, Deb, is that right?
I have a slightly busy council day.
Okay, yeah. But if folks want to go out to Jordan, Minnesota for that ribbon cutting, that's the 27th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
27th of August or September?
Of this month, yeah.
Okay.
And, on behalf of District 4, we welcome everyone out to Jordan. So.
All right,
That's it.
good.
Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else have anything for the good of the order?
I have a question for Member Martinson.
Oh, no.
No, I think it's exciting time to be planning and working on future projects and building them. And I think I've had that conversation with you as we're talking about building these projects, the Trails Active Transportation projects, to start engaging all the entities who will at some point maintain. And I know that's years down the road to fix them and plow them and all of those things. It's an issue that we deal with at MnDOT because we're responsible for that as well, not just the roads. And so it's something to maybe start early. Maybe it's too early now, but I think to engage people, to maybe at some point you need funding. You don't want to get to the point where people are pointing at each other whose job it is to do it. And anyway, so I just wanted to mention that.
If I may quickly respond to that, that's actually part of the legislative requirement that projects have to promise to maintain the projects, if they're building infrastructure projects, certainly not for the planning and those kinds of projects that don't have infrastructure. But if you're building infrastructure, the legislative language has a requirement that they make a commitment to maintain that infrastructure year-round. So that means snow plowing and ice removal. It means maintenance going forward. And that's actually part of the discussion about whether or not to require a local match, because in essence, that is a local match on the back end. It's just not an upfront match. So it has to be part of the conversation by law.
Okay. Anything else? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.